Hi, I'm Professor Jena Martin Emerson, here at the invitation of the West Virginia University Law Review to talk to you about some introductory thoughts on legal scholarship, particularly how to handle this world of scholarly writing that you may have never done before. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, and I think Sarah Brown, the executive notes editor, is going to have a few questions for me. And I'm also available by email afterwards if, in the course of hearing me talk, you have any questions and you want answers. I can try to the best of my ability to do so. Okay. Imagine that you're at a dinner party. All around you are groups of people having conversations that are on a wide variety of subjects. The latest episode of The Office, President Obama's healthcare agenda, the continuing effects of the financial crisis and its impact on your ability to find a job. There are all sorts of people participating in this conversation. Some are holding court. You know what I mean, the know-it-all guy who has an opinion on everything about the issue. You know, the one who hardly lets people get a word in edgewise. There's the girl who gives witty zingers for some levity at appropriate moments. There's the thoughtful, quiet type who doesn't say much, but when he does, you'll want to listen to him. Welcome to the world of legal scholarship. One of the best ways that I've found to understand it is to imagine it as one big dinner party. Assume that there's copious amounts of alcohol being consumed if there are law professors present. And at this dinner party, people are just having different conversations. Some conversations will obviously be more interesting to you than others. Some you'll just want to stand back and listen to, while others you'll just want to jump right in there with strong opinions of your own. Picking your topic, then, is, in essence, deciding what conversation you want to join. And it's fluid. You may start out thinking that you're talking about healthcare reform, when halfway through you realize that what you really have to say relates to the last episode of The Office. If it's any good, it's fluid. So here's a ground rule to keep in mind in thinking about your article. Don't worry that what you're saying has been said before. Just like in a conversation where people are expressing similar views, if it's a good conversation, and believe me, there are bad ones out there, someone will always be adding to a conversation, even if it's just with one small point to help move the conversation forward. Okay, speaking of moving the conversation forward, let's get some scholarese terms out of the way. The way that people evaluate whether the topic that you have is any good is by saying, how are you moving the debate forward? That's just a fancy way of saying, how are you contributing to the conversation with your article? There are many ways to do that, and I'll just highlight some of my favorites. The first I call the bring over. It's basically one big exercise in cross-pollination. Again, imagine the dinner party. Someone is discussing financial reform, and suddenly you interject and say, wow, that sounds just like a point someone over here was making about healthcare. Maybe if we combine the two subjects, we can think about this in a new way. This cross-pollination, or the bring-over, can be interdisciplinary, so bringing legal scholarship in from a sociological point of view, or it can be in the same discipline, so legal scholarship, but with different subject matter areas, so like business insecurities and healthcare issues. Now, the advantage of this is that it helps you look at things that are well-worn, that lots of people have talked about over and over again, like the legalization of prostitution, in a different way. The disadvantage is that it requires you to have an expertise in two areas of disciplines as opposed to just one. Okay, so the bring over, the cross-pollination. We also have the historical perspective. Or, for all you BSG fans, all of this has happened before and will happen again. The advantage is that it will allow you to remind people of things that have fallen off the radar in our short historical time frame, or attention span, I should say. So in theory, by reminding them, you can help them avoid the mistakes of the past. So for example, in discussing the current financial crisis and the genesis of the current financial crisis, you can talk about how this bore remarkable similarity to all of the causes that led to the crash of 1929. So the advantage, again, helps people to remember what happened in the past. Disadvantage It requires you to do extensive historical research, which, given your time constraints, you might not be able to do. One of my third favorites is what I call the nugget. This is where you provide one little thing in a big debate that people can chew on in a way they hadn't before. One example is how the recent Supreme Court decision of Citizens United impacted West Virginia elections in the last cycle. The advantage, short and sweet. Gets to the point, gets it in, gets it out. The disadvantage, short and sweet. It can lead it to be more of a descriptive piece as opposed to an analytical piece. But all of these have their downsides and all of these have their advantages. And these are just 3 of my favorites. There are many more out there. Okay, so now that I've given you some ideas about what types of conversations you want to have or what types of articles you want to write, let's go through some concrete steps to get you there. Okay, step 1, I've already briefly touched on. Think about the conversation you want to be a part of. Now, you can have a strong opinion about it, but beware if you do. This will only be effective if you're willing to have everything you thought you knew on this subject challenged and your mind changed. Otherwise, you'll just be writing a brief. And legal scholarship, if it's any good, is not a brief. It's an analysis. It thinks of different points of view. It takes into consideration the different assumptions. Much more effective, but terrifying, is if you pick a conversation that you're interested in, but you have no idea of how you want to contribute to it. This way, it will hold your interest through the research. You'll discover new things. You'll have your mind growing and expanding. The terrifying part comes if you think that you don't have an opinion on anything, or that everything you have an opinion on, someone has already said and said it better than you. If you are in that place, just remind yourself, point 1, you can always add something new, even if it's just a nugget. Breathe in, breathe out, repeat. Step number 2, once you've chosen a topic, go beyond the superficial. This is a common flaw in particularly student notes. Superficial articles are basically useless, and they're wannabe treaties. Unless all of you have the urge to suddenly sit down and write a 500-page volume on tort law, stay away from the superficial. The value of superficial analysis is that it's in coverage. It tells you everything you want to know about a particular subject. It doesn't dig deep. And that's what you're going to need to do in this type of writing. You're going to need to drill down. Well, what do I mean by that? Every topic or thesis or piece of writing has a number of assumptions built into it. If the writing is good, it will state its assumptions explicitly. Most writing is not that good. However, your good piece of writing can take a conversation and point out the different assumptions that people are using in other parts of the conversation. A better piece of writing will point out some of the flaws in those assumptions. Okay, so here's an example. And it's not an argument that I would make, but I'm pretty sure it's an argument that maybe some of the students would make. Superficial. Basing our entire grade for one class on one final is ridiculous. Okay, that's a topic, that's a thesis, but that's really basic and superficial. Let's dig deep a little bit. You could maybe ask, how does measuring my understanding of a class by grading me in any way accurately assess my performance? That's a little deeper. Okay, let's deconstruct it even more. Why are we even using grades in an academic institution? Is this counterproductive? Is this helpful somewhere? Or maybe it's just the product of the industrialization of our society or the laziness of professors. I don't know. But it's a deeper way of looking at something other than the entire grade for my class being one final is ridiculous. Okay, step 1, you've thought about the topic, thought about the conversation you want to be a part of. Step 2, you go beyond the superficial. Step 3, think about how your topic will shape itself in the final product. And to do that, it needs to be narrow enough to be meaningful. So for instance, and again, these are just guidelines. People do it differently. But basic aspects of writing a paper will have an introduction. We'll have a part 2, which is background and context. And we'll have part 3, which is an analysis. Let's talk about the introduction for a second. In the introduction, you should clearly state what the problem is. You should state what people have done to try and solve the problem in the past. And you should state why those solutions have been ineffective or the assumptions that people have used for those solutions and why they are flawed. And then you state why your solution is better or how you will add to the conversation. Thinking about the introduction in this way hopefully sheds some light on why this needs to be narrow. Because let's say your topic was peace in the Middle East. Clearly, an introduction that meaningfully addresses all of these issues will be probably 20 pages long. And you don't have 20 pages to write an introduction. OK, so you have your introduction, one way of thinking of the final project. Let's move to the context, the background. You have to talk about, in part 2, about why the problem that you've discussed is a problem. Why are folks up in arms? Why is this a flaw in the legal system? Why did the judge decide the case the wrong way? How have others attempted to deal with this specific problem? And then part 3 is your analysis. How does my proposal or my thesis attack the problem differently? What are the implications of using my proposal for the larger conversation or for this debate over here? And it could be something as simple as my problem or my solution is more effective because the judge for this case that I'm talking about got the right result for the wrong reasons. He didn't base it on process. And process is the key to understanding how we solve this problem in the future. So those are my initial thoughts on sort of how to get started in legal scholarship. And honestly, the best piece of advice I can give you is just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out, repeat. It can seem daunting, but once you get started, it's really not that bad. Questions?
We have a few questions that came in. First, you talked a little bit about the writing structure and the structure of an academic paper. And selecting a topic, what should students be thinking about looking forward? For example, the structure in this paper, how does that structure affect searching for a topic or researching a topic?
OK, that's an excellent question. Obviously, what you're interested in and how that turns into a topic will affect how you research it, right? So let's say, and so let me back up and talk about sort of concrete steps on types of ways to find a topic, other than thinking about, what conversation do I want to be a part of? Well, start, again, with what you care about, right? But in order to find out specific ideas of what you care about, so let's say you care about healthcare reform, but you don't know the first thing about what the legal landscape is on healthcare reform. Well, start looking at what people are saying. So I would look at trade journals. I would look at law reviews. I would look at newspaper articles on what sort of the current strings of the debate are. And then, believe it or not, an opinion will form from there. Like, oh, that person's saying this. This healthcare bill is pending. Let's think about that. Maybe I want to delve into that. Speaking of pending legislation, right? Looking at what, for instance, the West Virginia legislature is doing in a subject matter that you care about is a great way to find a topic. Thinking about a circuit split, right? So if the West Virginia Supreme Court or if the Fourth Circuit is dealing with a certain issue that you care about differently than other jurisdictions, that's a really good way to find a topic, right? Look at the tension. Look at where the problems lie. Recently enacted rules, recently enacted Supreme Court decisions, all about something that you care about is a really good way of starting. And then in terms of finding out more about it, I'm a little unusual from, I think, what you get from most advice. I tend to start with law review articles or trade journals or sort of secondary commentaries, secondary sources. A lot of people, let's say, for instance, if you're talking about pending legislation, would tell you to start with the legislation and just sort of dig into it. And I find that starting with law review articles is a really good way to sort of just wrap your arms around the problem, just so you can sort of get an idea of, OK, this is where the debate is going. This is where people are talking about it. Now, the reason why people don't recommend it, and this is the danger and the thing that you have to keep in mind, is that if you start with law review articles, you can find that your mind is made up before you've actually gotten to your topic or formed an opinion. Your opinion will be influenced by what other people have to say. But if you can use them just as a, OK, this is information that I can use to help find out what people are saying, then I think it's a really good way to start.
do you think about the counter-argument of a topic? How much should students be thinking about that now?
I think it just comes to you. I wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about it or thinking about it. I think, again, part of what makes really good legal scholarship is when you think about the assumptions in your own work, right? And how people would attack your own assumptions. But that's hopefully just going to come as you start writing and as you start thinking about the outline to it. I think if it's one of those hot debates, like healthcare reform and how the Obama administration is dealing with healthcare reform, that stuff's just going to be out there anyway. But I wouldn't spend a lot of time thinking at this stage about, okay, well, now I have to make sure that my argument addresses these 3 points. It will come later on in your writing. Don't get so caught up that it paralyzes you from taking a step forward.
Associate editors have been given a number of different assignments and deadlines, for example, writing an abstract and developing a research plan. What do you think the significance of these assignments are, and how can students utilize the assignments to their benefit?
Okay. Let's just be honest. One of the most practical, basic reasons why you guys get assignments like this is because you need to make sure that you're not cramming and trying to write a 25-page paper the night before. That may have worked in undergrad, or you might be part of that 1% of the population that also belongs to Mensa that can do that, but most people can't. And this helps to keep you on track and keep you accountable so that you're thinking about the topic in a meaningful way throughout the semester, as opposed to trying to cram it in over Christmas break or even the night before. So that's just, we're trying to help you produce the best product that you can. Having said that, the best way to take advantage of it, to get sort of the full effect of it, is to take them seriously, right? And not just turn out something 5 minutes where you have to hand it in and say, okay, then I'm done. And trust me, I understand how law school is. I've been there. I've had to write notes, and I understand the pressure of it on why you would want to just say, okay, well, I'll just do that and not think about it now. But the whole point of giving you these internal deadlines is so that you can be mindful of this topic throughout, and that will make it a more thoughtful product. It will make it a better research product, and it will make it a better written product. So it directly impacts your ability to write the final paper. Now, in terms of specific topics, I think you said there was a research plan. There's an abstract that they have to write. All of those have different specific utilities. So, for instance, an abstract is really good at helping you really think about what you want to say. So it's real simple when you're trying to condense your thesis into one paragraph. That's a lot harder than sitting down and rambling at a computer for 25 pages, because it's really easy, believe it or not, to write something longer, at least for me, than it is to write something shorter. When it's short, when it's concise, you really have to know what you want to say and be able to say it concretely, and it gets rid of all the fluff. So to me, that's the advantage of writing an abstract. It really helps you sort of crystallize where your thesis is. And for your reviewer, right, for the person who's reviewing your abstract or the advisor that you have, bringing that to them will help them to see whether or not you're on the right track or whether you're trying to write a treatise on peace in the Middle East. A research plan is a really good way to see, again, if you've wrapped your whole arms around what's out there. And in that case, I would take my research plan, I would do it on a grid, I would have all the different research terms, all the different places that you've looked, and I bring that to someone in the library on the research staff, like Susan Wolford. She is amazingly helpful to people who want to show her what they've done. And she can point out databases that you've never known. She can say, okay, well, since you're researching legislation, let's look at what they said during the debates of that, which you might not have even known that existed, right? Legislative debates and how to find those. So developing a research plan is really good just to make sure that, again, you've wrapped your arms around the significant things that you need for your particular topic. And then writing an outline is just to make sure that you have a structure, right? So that not only do you have an idea of what you want to say, but you know how you want to get there, right? So that it's more than just, okay, here's my topic and here's my solution, but you're like deciding whether you're wanting to attack it topically or whether you're wanting to attack it chronologically. There's a ton of different ways you can get to your proposal and your solution, and an outline helps crystallize that for you.
Our last question, came from a student via email. Do you have any suggestions for managing the notes process? Should we designate a certain amount of time per week, or would it be more beneficial to work during large chunks of time?
That's a really good question, and people have all kinds of different thoughts about that. For me, I tend to work really well when I have large chunks of time because I'm incredibly easily distracted. And so if I keep going back and then stopping and going back and stopping, I find that my writing is very jilted. But there are other people who swear by having a set time every day that is devoted to writing and nothing else, right? So 10 to 12 is your writing time and that's all you do, or your research time and that's all you do. Whichever way you do it, you need to keep it sacred, though. So let's say Friday from 9 to 5 is the time that you're working on your project. You make Friday from 9 to 5 sacred. Like, you're allowed bathroom breaks and food, and that's about it. If 10 to 12 is your time, that's not the time to call your parents and catch up with all the latest happenings down in Beckley. You have to use that time and make it sacred. The other thing that I will just say that I think is really helpful in terms of the note process that, again, scholars who have been doing this for years still do is I create a reverse timeline. So you know from now what your end dates are, right? When your first draft is due, when your final draft is due, when the research plan, the abstract, all those deadlines. I would start with the last deadline that you have and create a calendar that works backwards, right? So estimate how long you think it will take you to do research for case law. Let's say you think it'll take 3 hours to get an idea of what the topic is. And then double it. And then graph that out over the amount of time that you have to make sure that you're fully giving yourself the time to do it. Same thing for an outline. If you think it takes 2 hours, say it takes 4. And then graph that out in a way that you'll have some lead-in time, some break time, some makeup time in case the world just comes to an end and you have to completely rework how you've done things. I find reverse outlines really, really helpful just in getting through the notes process and making sure you're staying on track and staying accountable.
Thank you, Professor Amerson. And that's it for our webinar and the first of the series for the notes process. Thank you for joining us, and that's it.
Thank you for having me.